Imagine this. Two imperial officials are thrown out of a castle window in Prague, landing in a pile of dung below. What seems like a bizarre, almost comical event became the trigger for one of Europe's deadliest conflicts, the 30 Years' War. This is the story of the Defenestration of Prague, an event that would send shockwaves across the continent and alter the course of European history. The roots of the Defenestration of Prague stretch back long before 1618. To truly understand it, we need to explore the religious and political landscape of Europe at the time. Since the Protestant Reformation in the early 16th century, Europe had been divided between Catholic and Protestant factions. The Peace of Augsburg, signed in 1555, had temporarily settled tensions within the Holy Roman Empire by allowing the rulers of individual states to determine whether their regions would be Catholic or Protestant. But this peace was fragile. By the early 17th century, the Protestant Reformation was still shaking the foundation of European unity. The Holy Roman Empire, an enormous multi-ethnic entity that covered much of Central Europe, was ruled by the Catholic Habsburg dynasty, whose grip on power was being challenged by Protestant forces. The region of Bohemia, modern-day Czech Republic, was predominantly Protestant, but it was ruled by the Catholic Habsburgs. Tensions in Bohemia had been escalating for years. Protestant nobles feared they were losing their religious freedoms under the rule of Ferdinand II, the newly appointed Catholic King of Bohemia and future Holy Roman Emperor. Ferdinand was a devout Catholic, deeply committed to restoring Catholicism across his lands, and the Protestant nobles of Bohemia saw his reign as a direct threat to their autonomy and beliefs. In 1609, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, under pressure, had issued a document called the Letter of Majesty, which granted religious freedoms to Protestants in Bohemia. The letter allowed them to build churches on royal lands and hold Protestant services. It was a compromise that kept a fragile peace in the region. But when Ferdinand II came to power, things quickly changed. He revoked many of these religious rights, favoring Catholicism and appointing Catholic officials to high-ranking positions. Protestant churches were shut down, and tensions began to boil. Protestant leaders felt betrayed and threatened, and they feared the worst, that their religious freedoms were being systematically stripped away. In May 1618, tensions reached their breaking point. Protestants in Prague, the capital of Bohemia, were outraged when two of their churches were ordered to be demolished by Catholic authorities. This act was seen as the ultimate violation of the Letter of Majesty, and the Protestant nobility in Bohemia decided they had to act. They believed the only way to protect their religion and their rights was through direct confrontation. The setting for the event was Prague Castle in Prague, a stunning fortress perched above the Vltava River. On May 23, 1618, a group of 200 Protestant nobles stormed the castle and confronted two of Ferdinand II's imperial representatives, Count Jaroslav Borzida of Martinis and Count Vilém Slavata of Chlum. These two men were high-ranking Catholic officials and seen by the Protestant nobility as the key enforcers of Ferdinand's anti-Protestant policies in Bohemia. The third person present was Philip Fabricius, the secretary of the imperial regents. In a tense meeting inside the castle, the Protestant nobles accused the Catholic officials of violating the religious freedoms promised by the Letter of Majesty. Heated words flew, and it quickly became clear that the meeting was not going to end in a peaceful agreement. The Protestant nobles were not there to negotiate, they were there to send a message. Led by Count Jindřich Matthias Thurn, the Protestant nobles seized Martinis, Slavata, and Fabricius and dragged them to the third-floor window of the council chamber. Without hesitation, the nobles threw them out of the window, an act that would forever be known as the Defenestration of Prague. The officials plummeted nearly 70 feet, 21 meters, down into the moat below. Miraculously, all three survived the fall, which would seem fatal under normal circumstances. According to Catholic accounts, they were saved by divine intervention. The Virgin Mary herself supposedly cushioned their fall. However, Protestant accounts were less miraculous, claiming the men survived simply because they landed in a pile of manure that had accumulated in the moat. The Defenestration of Prague was not just an isolated act of rebellion. It was the spark that set Europe ablaze. Bohemian nobles, emboldened by their actions, immediately began organizing armed resistance against the Catholic Habsburgs. They formed a provisional government and rejected Ferdinand II's authority as their king, even offering the throne of Bohemia to a Protestant ruler, Frederick V, the Elector Palatine. Ferdinand II was enraged by the Defenestration and the subsequent rebellion. He quickly gathered his forces and prepared to bring the rebellious Bohemians back under control. The stage was set for a full-scale war between Catholic and Protestant forces, not just in Bohemia, but across the Holy Roman Empire and eventually much of Europe. The Defenestration of Prague ignited the Bohemian Revolt, which was the first phase of the much larger conflict that would come to be known as the 30 Years' War. This war, which lasted from 1618 to 1648, was one of the most devastating conflicts in European history, drawing in nearly every major power on the continent and causing immense suffering and destruction. What started as a localized religious conflict between Protestants and Catholics in Bohemia soon escalated into a pan-European war involving the Habsburg monarchy, France, Spain, Sweden, and numerous German states. The 30 Years' War was not only about religion, it became a political struggle for dominance in Europe. It devastated large parts of Central Europe, particularly the German-speaking regions of the Holy Roman Empire, where famine, disease, and constant warfare left entire towns and regions depopulated. For Bohemia, the Defenestration and the subsequent revolt would end in disaster. After a series of battles, the Catholic Habsburgs crushed the Protestant forces at the Battle of White Mountain in 1620. Bohemia was brought back under Habsburg control, and the consequences for the rebels were severe. Many Protestant leaders were executed, their lands confiscated, and Bohemia was forcibly recatholicized. It marked the end of Protestant influence in the region for centuries to come. The Defenestration of Prague may seem like a small event, but its repercussions were enormous. It was the catalyst for the 30 Years' War, which reshaped the political and religious map of Europe. The war itself would end with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, a series of treaties that marked the end of large-scale religious wars in Europe and laid the groundwork for the modern state system. The Defenestration also became a symbol of Bohemian resistance to external control. For centuries, Czech nationalists looked back at the event as a moment of defiance against foreign rule. Even today, the story of men being thrown out of a window to spark a war resonates in Czech history and culture. The word defenestration itself, meaning the act of throwing someone out of a window, became immortalized in history because of this event. It symbolizes a radical, often violent, rejection of authority, a theme that would be repeated throughout European history. The Defenestration of Prague was a moment that shaped history, a violent, almost surreal act that ignited a war that would devastate Europe for 3 decades. It's a reminder that small events can have enormous consequences, and the tensions between religion and power can have lasting impacts on societies. If you enjoyed this historical deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the past. Until next time, this is Matt, signing off.